elude me for the gratification of a dying man's whim? Never! In my rage I could have throttled him then and there without a qualm. Fear of the law alone held me back. I tried to dissuade him, but it was useless. I then bribed the servant, sent to bring the attorney, to report that he was out of town, and when that proved of no avail, I sent for Richard Hobson, a penniless shyster, whose lack of means and lack of principle I believed would render him an easy tool in my hands. He came. I was waiting to receive him, and we entered into compact, I little dreaming I was setting loose on my track a veritable hellhound. The will was drawn and executed, Hobson and one Alexander Macpherson, an old friend of my father's, signing as witnesses. Within 24 hours of its execution, Richard Hobson was richer by several £100, and the will was in my possession. 2 days later, I had a false telegram sent to our place, summoning Macpherson to his home in Scotland. He left at once, before my father's burial, and his death, which occurred a few weeks later, removed the last obstacle in the way of carrying my plans into execution. My brother was at that time in Australia, but in what part of the country I did not know, nor did I try to ascertain. My constant fear was that he might in some way, though by what means I could not imagine, get some knowledge of the will and return to set up a claim to the estate. As soon as possible, therefore, notwithstanding the protests of my attorneys, I sold the estate and came to America. Concerning the years that followed, it is needless to go into detail. They brought me wealth, influence, power, all that I had craved, but little of happiness. Even when there came tidings of my brother's death at sea, and I felt that at last my title to the estate was secure, I had little enjoyment in its possession. Richard Hobson had already begun his blackmailing schemes, his demands growing more frequent and exorbitant with each succeeding year. Through him also, the woman who had wrecked my brother's life received some inkling of my secret, and through this knowledge, slight as it was, gained enough of a hold over me that life was becoming an intolerable burden. Through all these years, however, I kept the will in my possession. Even after hearing of the death of my brother, a cowardly, half-superstitious dread kept me from destroying it, though doubtless I would have done so after making my own will had I not been prevented by circumstances unforeseen, which I will now state. The events which I am about to relate are stamped upon my brain as though by fire. They have haunted me day and night for the past 5 months. On the 7th of July last, I made and executed my will in favor of my namesake, Hugh Mainwaring, and on the following day, his birthday and mine, he was to be declared my heir. It was past 11 o'clock on the night of that day when I retired to my private library, and it was fully an hour later when, having dismissed my secretary, I finally found myself alone, as I supposed, for the night. My thoughts were far from pleasant. I had just had a stormy interview with my housekeeper, Mrs. LaGrange, who had tried, as on previous occasions, to coerce me by threats into a private marriage and a public recognition of her as my wife and of her child and mine, and in addition, the occurrences of the day had been of a nature to recall the past, and events which I usually sought to bury in oblivion were passing before my mental vision despite my efforts to banish them. Suddenly, a voice which seemed like an echo of the past recalled me to the present. Somewhat startled, I turned quickly, confronting a man who had entered unperceived from the tower room. He was my own height and size, with curling black hair and heavy mustache, but I was unable to distinguish his features as he remained standing partly in the shadow. Before I could recover from my surprise, he spoke again, his voice still vaguely familiar. "The master of Fair Oaks," the words were spoken with stinging emphasis, "seems depressed on the eve of his festal day, the day on which he is to name the heir and successor to his vast estates." I remembered that a stranger had called that day during my absence, who, my secretary had informed me, had shown a surprising familiarity with my private plans. "I think," I replied coldly, "that you favored me with a call this afternoon, but whatever your business then or now, you will have to defer it for a few days. I do not know how you gained admittance to these apartments at this hour, but I will see that you are escorted from them without delay." And as I spoke, I rose to ring for a servant. He anticipated my intention, however, and with the agility of a panther sprang noiselessly across the room, intercepting me, at the same time raising a large English bulldog revolver which he levelled at me. "Not so fast, not so fast," he said softly. "You can afford to wait a little. I have waited for years." I stood as though rooted to the spot, gazing at him with a sort of fascination. As he emerged into the light there was something almost familiar in his features, and yet something horribly incongruous and unreal. His eyes glowed like living fire, his soft, low tones reminded me of nothing so much as the purring of a tiger, while the smile that played upon his lips was more terrible than anything I had ever seen on human face. It was 10 times more fearful than the muzzle of the revolver confronting me, and seemed to freeze the very blood in my veins. "You take a base advantage. I am unarmed," I sneered. "I know too well with whom I had to deal to come unarmed," he replied, "though this," and he lowered the revolver, "this is not the sort of weapon you would employ. A thrust in the dark, a stab in the back, that is your style, coward." "I demand an explanation of this," I said. He folded his arms, still retaining his hold upon the weapon, as he answered, "Explanations will follow in due time, but surely, on the eve of the 50th anniversary of such a life as yours, congratulations are first in order. Allow me to congratulate you, Hugh Mainwaring, upon the success which has attended and crowned the past 25 years of your life, upon the rich harvest you have reaped during all these years, the amassed wealth, the gratified ambitions, the almost illimitable power, the adulation and homage, all so precious to your sordid soul, and for which you have bartered honor, happiness, character, all, in short, that life is worth. Standing as you do tonight at the 50th milestone on life's journey, I congratulate you upon your recollections of the past, and upon your anticipations for the future, as you descend to an unhonored and unloved old age." Each word was heaped with scorn, and as I looked into the burning eyes fixed upon mine, and watched the sardonic smile hovering about his lips, I wondered whether he were some Mephistopheles, some fiend incarnate, sent to torture me, or whether he were really flesh and blood. The mocking smile now left his face, but his eyes held me speechless as he continued. "No wonder that memories of bygone years haunted your thoughts tonight. Memories, perhaps, of a father whose dying will you disregarded, of a brother whom you twice defrauded. Once of the honor and sanctity of his home, then, as if that were not enough, of his birthright, his heritage from generations of our race." "Stop!" I cried, stung to anger by his accusations and startled by the strange words, "our race," which seemed to fall so familiarly from his lips. "Stop! Are you mad? Do you know what you are saying? Once more I demand that you state who or what you are, and your business here." "That is quickly stated, Hugh Mainwaring," he answered, in tones which made my heart beat with a strange dread. "I am Harold Scott Mainwaring. I am here to claim no brotherhood or kinship with you, but to claim and to have my own, the birthright restored to me by the last will and testament of a dying father, of which you have defrauded me for 25 years. "You are a liar and an impostor," I cried, enraged at the sound of my brother's name, and for the instant believing the man to be some emissary of Hobson's, who had used it to work upon my feelings. Drawing himself up to his full height, his eyes blazing, he answered in low tones, "Dare you apply those epithets to me, usurper that you are? You are a liar and a thief, and if you had your deserts you would be in a felon's cell tonight, or transported to the wilds of Australia. I an impostor? See, and judge for yourself." And with a sudden, swift movement, the black curling hair and mustache were dashed to the floor, and he stood before me, the exact counterpart of myself. Stunned by the transformation, I gazed at him speechless. It was like looking in a mirror, feature for feature identically the same. For a few seconds my brain seemed to reel from the shock, but his tones recalled me to myself. "Ah," he said with mocking emphasis, "who is the impostor now?" My first thought was of self-vindication, and to effect, if possible, a compromise with him. "I am no impostor or usurper," I said, "because, believing you dead, I have used that to which in the event of your death I would be legally entitled, even had you any claim. And I am willing, not as an acknowledgment of any valid claim on your part, but as a concession on my own part, to give you a liberal share in the estate, and to pay you any reasonable sum which you may require." He stopped me with an intolerant gesture. "Do not attempt any palliation of the past with me," he said sternly. "It is worse than useless. And do not think that you can make any compromises with me, or purchase my silence with your ill-gotten wealth. That may have served your purpose in the past with your associate and coadjutor, Richard Hobson, the man who holds in his mercenary grasp the flimsy reputation which is all that is left to you, or with the woman, cruel as the grave and false as hell, who once wrecked my life, and now, with the son that you dare not acknowledge, rules your home. But you cannot buy my silence. I come to you as no beggar. I am a richer man to-day than you. but for the sake of generations past, as well as of generations yet to come, I will have my own.